I'm Celine Yeager.
I'm Sarah Gross.
This is Nine, Voices for Title IX, powered by Inside Tracker,
a podcast that tells the stories behind the law that changed everything.
Hey, Sarah Gross here.
I'm Catherine Taylor.
Sarah True here.
Hey there, this is Dr. Shauna Payne-Gold.
Celine here.
I'm Haley Chura.
Hey, it's Alyssa Godesky here.
I'm a professional triathlete, Ironman champion,
professional triathlete,
health and fitness writer,
a gravel cyclist,
two-time Olympian,
and former All-American triathlete.
Founder and CEO of Feisty Media. None of us would have had the opportunities we've had in sports without the passing of Title IX and the changes that came in its wake. So, as the hosts of Feisty Media's podcasts, we decided to band together and create a series to tell the stories behind the law that changed everything. This special series will be presented on the Feisty Women's Performance Podcast feed. Subscribe now to the Feisty Women's Performance Podcast. This is Nine.
Hey, Celine.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, so we are here because we have an exciting new series that's coming out here at Feisty. I know everyone is like behind the scenes excited about it. We're trying to be low-key excited because it technically doesn't launch until next week. And I know myself, I really want to share,
Yeah.
So basically, we have a new series called Nine Voices for Title IX. And it's all about, well, I'm going to let you talk about what Title IX is, but part of the reason I love this so much is it's the first time since Feisty has sort of grown over the last couple of years, and we have multiple hosts from multiple podcasts that we produce coming together to work together on this project. So each of our hosts actually interviewed a different person who was somehow involved either around at the time of the law, involved in making the law, or affected as an athlete by the law. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah, it really is. And I think what's cool about it is that we have all ourselves personally been impacted by Title IX, even if we didn't recognize it at first. A lot of us in the staff, to be completely transparent with everybody, like they might be, have educated ourselves about Title IX, right? We all knew it existed, but it's that kind of thing. That's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but I think a lot of people don't even understand that, it came about as a civil rights law, in 1972 in the US, and it was passed as part of an Education Amendments Act. And it prohibits sex-based discrimination in school or education program, but it wasn't really designed around athletics at first. But it very much created a sea change in athletic opportunities for girls and women in sport. And along that, it was transformational, but also there are roadblocks and different barriers to it too. So I think that I learned a ton from this series, and I think that everybody involved in it learned a ton from this series, and that maybe is one of the most exciting parts of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I knew about Title IX. I don't know. I think because I'm a historian, so by nature, I have this little, if I hear something, I Google it and try to figure out the history. So I knew about the effects of the law on women's sports, but when I was a kid growing up, I recognized that the pinnacle of women's sports at that time was either you're going to the Olympic Games, which was a bit of a long shot for most of us, or getting a scholarship to go to a US university, as a Canadian kid. And I now am thinking, oh, that is a reflection of Title IX and how money was no longer able to only be dispersed mostly to men's sports. And so that created just tons and tons of opportunities, and that I had internalized by the time I was 7 or 8 years old, completely realized what those opportunities were.
Yeah, no, it was definitely transformational. And I think what is important too, that becomes very obvious, is that the work is not done.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So what was some of the, you and I each did 2 interviews, and what we're going to do is for our audience, Celine and I are going to, every week, we're going to do like introduce each of the interviews, but our podcast hosts have actually sat down with different women and actually done the interviews. So you'll hear a little bit of Celine and I, but it will be all different voices throughout the series. But what are some of the things that stand out for you, Celine?
Yeah, I mean, what stands out is that some of these women like intentionally went into their missions to make history, to change the course of history for us. And that we now have a responsibility to do the same. Because I was perfectly willing just to sit on my laurels and be like, this is done. But it's just so much not done.
Yeah. And I think you're saying you sit on your laurels, but like, you're absolutely not sitting on your laurels and are making change every day for women.
Right. I guess I don't think of it in this, but in that context of what Title IX wanted to do as far as equity in institutions. I mean, I tried to do cultural change, but it's interesting. Like, we want to create an empowering culture, right? So we do that. But this institutional piece is a really big, important part of that. And I don't like that part of my brain is not necessarily always switched on. And this series really did switch on that part of my brain.
Yeah, I love that. I remember doing like one of my feminist history classes when I was in university. One of the questions we had on an essay was, do you need a law to change to make change for women? Right. And you could argue kind of like yes or no on that. And so if you argued yes, like a lot of people would argue around Title IX, and that actually you have to make something illegal or nothing changes, because people don't give up power and privilege just because you ask them to.
Never.
Right. But then on the flip side, like I do think we can, because I'm so much into like this, like if we can get a loud voice and change our cultural messaging, we can make a change that way too, or even in terms of like individual institutional policies and examining that kind of stuff. That's like that layer below the law. It's not like it doesn't have to be a change in the law of the land. But yeah, I'm with you. I have a newfound respect for actually the women like Patsy Mink, who we hear about from in our first episode next week, like who actually like understood that like there was a repetitive pattern that was generational that she observed in her mother, and she knew that like she was going to have the same opportunities or lack of opportunities if she didn't stand up and do something. And then she kind of went all the way, like the first woman of color in Congress, like she kind of just kept pushing throughout her life. And it seemed like Wendy Mink, the way she talks about it, like it was her calling, and I was just like sort of so inspired by that, by the women who go, hey, like I'm going to go and make a change at the top level.
Right.
Cool. Okay. So what can we hope for? So 9 weeks starting next week. On June 16th, we launch. That's a Thursday. And then after that, we have 9 episodes. The actual 50th anniversary of Title IX is on June 23rd. So who else can we expect to hear from along the way?
We can expect to hear from Bobby Gibb, who is the first woman to actually run the Boston Marathon, which I think a lot of people don't know, because they think of Catherine Switzer. Janet Cohn, who's the athletic director at University of North Carolina at Asheville. Amanda Levy, which I really enjoyed. She's a professional MMA fighter, and Title IX maybe didn't work in her favor right out of the gate there as a wrestler. So, there's a lot. We have a lot of great guests coming on from a variety of aspects.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear from Amanda. And also Sarah True, who's my co-host on If We Were Writing, her husband's neighbor is Joni Benoit Samuelson. And so she's like, I just know her as Joni. I'm like, okay. But that's awesome. I'm stoked to hear from her too, like the first champion, the first women's marathon champion, the first year they had the women's marathon in the Olympic Games, Joan Benoit. So yeah, we've got some really cool interviews coming up over the next 9 weeks. And if you don't already subscribe to the Feisty Women's Performance podcast feed, you may be listening on that now, but if you're not, go over there and subscribe there. And that's where you'll find all the episodes drop. And the first one drops on June 16th.
Stay tuned.
When it's legal, then it will be accepted. At this particular point, it's not legal for a woman to box.
Well, I would just love to see the girls get into sports. Maybe that'll straighten out some of the situations that they have, because women think that they can really do the things that men can do. I don't really think so.
50 years ago, women and girls had few opportunities to participate, let alone excel, in sports. Women's programs were underfunded, and worse, some considered it improper and unfeminine to participate.
My personal feelings are that a woman is supposed to be feminine. I do know if I'm on the subway and a woman comes on the subway, I'll get up. If there's no other seats, I'll give her my seat. But if the woman is a boxer, I'm not going to get up and I'm not going to hold the door.
In 1972, the U.S. government passed a law prohibiting sex-based discrimination in government-funded education programs, including high school and college sports.
The type of woman who tends to excel in sports naturally tends to be a more highly motivated type of individual than men, because they haven't come up through a pampered athletic system.
It hasn't been easy.
It has not been easy.
In a new series by Feisty Media, we explore the stories behind the law that changed everything. This special series will be presented on the Feisty Women's Performance Podcast feed. Subscribe now to the Feisty Women's Performance Podcast. This is 9.
9.
9.
9.
9.
9.
9.